husband and I hired a surrogate because I can't have children, but it turns out she was having an affair with my husband. I discovered their plan through emails to take my baby and money. I, 33F, have been married to my husband Zach, 36M, for the last 10 years now, and we have been together for over 13 years. I met him in college, and while he was a couple of years older than me, that wasn't a problem in our relationship. I have always been an ambitious woman, and he knew that about me since the time we had met. I work as a fashion designer in a global label, the name of which I cannot take for obvious reasons. I have worked very hard to reach where I am because I started off in the industry with no connections and no backing from anyone. I had to slowly crawl my way up the ladder in my field, and I am really proud of where I have come. When things were getting serious between Zach and me, I had told him that for me, establishing my career was a priority, and if he could not understand and support it, I could not really think of having a life with him. Zach understood completely because he is very driven and ambitious himself. He currently works in the finance department of a tech company and has steadily grown in his career to create a name for himself. 3 years ago, however, Zach and I started having issues in our marriage. He felt that I had done really well in my career and that the time had come to focus on starting a family and raising kids. I did not feel the same way. While I knew that I had come a long way, I knew that there was still time, and there was more that I could do. I had, by that point in time, begun looking to switch to my current label or other labels of the same stature. Securing employment here is very tricky, but my old job was in jeopardy, too, due to COVID-19. I knew they would begin laying us off soon, and I couldn't afford that, so I was looking to make the switch before something untoward happened. Zach, on the other hand, thought that this was the perfect opportunity for us to try for kids. If I got laid off, I'd get a break, and I could just focus on the baby for a couple of years and then start working again if I wanted to. I did not want that for myself at all. Any time that we had a conversation about it, it ended up turning into a fight, and I knew that he was not interested in listening to me or hearing my perspective. So I started applying to these places without confiding in him. I felt horrible at first because he was my partner and we had always shared things with each other, but I knew that I could not sacrifice my career at this juncture. A few months later, in late 2021, I landed my current job. When I did, I was over the moon, ecstatic, and extremely proud of myself, but Zach, unfortunately, did not replicate those sentiments. He felt blindsided that I had taken such a huge step without considering his opinions, and how it would derail our family for the considerable future. I tried explaining my point of view to him, but he was hurt and didn't want to make any kind of sense. I knew that I needed to give this time in order to salvage and improve our relationship. By April 2022, I had proven my mettle to my managers and supervisors, and my terms of employment were upgraded. The benefits that I have since been offered have been unbelievable. And this was essentially why I needed to make the switch. I knew that in these big labels, once you secure a place for yourself, and work hard initially, you wield a lot of bargaining power. When I told Zach about the perks I was being offered, he at first thought that I was joking. They were that good. I would get 6 months of paid maternity leave, along with another 6 months of either unpaid leave, or work from home. I was free to choose. None of this would have been possible in my older job. I thought that this was thus the best time to try for a baby because now I would not have to compromise my career for motherhood. I had a secure job that had provisions to allow me to transition into this new phase of life as easily as possible. I thought everything was going well, and we started trying for a kid. Unfortunately, we did not have any success till November 2022, which is when we decided to go to the doctor to see what was up. Both of us were getting worried, him more than me, and we knew that this was the best step to take in such a situation. The results of the test were clear. I had a very low chance of conceiving naturally. I was devastated because I really wanted a child. The doctor said that this was not something that was related to my age or lifestyle, but was a side effect of a debilitating illness I had in my late teens, so essentially there was nothing that I could do about it. Zach, however, did not understand this. He felt that it was because I was over 30 years old that these problems were arising. He was genuinely behaving like a moron, not listening to anything the doctor was saying, but coming up with stories and theories of his own. He started blaming me and my ambition for my infertility, saying that if I had just listened to him and not focused on my career so much, we would have been parents by now. No amount of discussions, arguments, family intervention, or medical opinion would change his mind. It was as though he was waiting for the perfect opportunity to blame me and hate my job. It got very exhausting for me mentally, especially since I was also dealing with my own personal sense of grief. I was heartbroken when faced with the reality that I would never be able to carry a child to term. It was the darkest period of my life, and I had no support from anyone. It was here that my in-laws intervened. They had come to our place for Christmas that year, and when they saw the state we were in, they were appalled. Both of them urged us to work things out on our own, but we were butting heads all the time. It was then that they decided to fly down and talk to us regarding our issues. My Phil tore a new one into Zach for blaming me for something I had no control over. Even my Mill said that she was disgusted that she had raised a son like him. They supported me throughout, and I was very grateful for their support. I know for sure that had they not intervened at that point in time, the marriage would have broken down. In hindsight, I sometimes feel that maybe that would have been better, because neither my in-laws nor I knew what was going to happen next. After a lot of back and forth, fights, and tears, things got better between Zach and me. It was hard to accept the fact that I would not be able to conceive, but I was slowly and gradually coming to terms with that information. After a few weeks, I asked Zach if he would be okay with adoption, because at the end of the day, we wanted to be parents, and there were too many children in the world who needed this. I had no issues with loving or raising a child that isn't my own biologically, but I also knew that it was not necessary that Zach would also think this way. Even when we were dating, I remember we were discussing parenthood once. I had asked once whether he would be open to adoption in the future. He seemed so amused at the proposition at the time, as though I had said the most bizarre thing ever. He laughed at me and said that he never thought about these things because he knew that such a situation would never arise. I pressed him a little, but I saw that he was getting annoyed, so I dropped it. And the topic never came up later. So I approached him with a lot of hesitation, but I knew that this was an important conversation and now was the correct time to have it. I broached the topic very gently, just beating around the bush at first, but he caught on soon enough. Before I could even mention adoption from my side, he blankly said that he would not raise anyone else's kid, so adoption was off the table completely. He said it as though it was final, and there would be no discussion about it. I tried to press it further because I wanted to open all options to make this possible for us, but he was adamant about his stance. He just would not listen to anything that I was trying to say. I was exhausted, and I asked him what other option did we have. He said that I could either go for fertility treatments, which he made abundantly clear was what he wanted, and if not that, then we could go for surrogacy. I made it clear in no uncertain terms that I would not be taking fertility treatments. I know a lot of women who do, and I know the kind of torture they have to put their bodies through in order to make it possible. Spending all that money, harming my body in the process, only to have a kid that was mine did not make sense to me. Both of us therefore had completely vetoed each other's first options. Mine was adoption, which he was not okay with at all, and he was fertility treatments, even the idea of which I did not want to entertain. The common ground that was somewhat acceptable to both of us was surrogacy. Neither of us had thought of it as our preferred option, and there was a lot of back and forth in trying to convince the other person to relent and choose either adoption or fertility treatments, but we were both stubborn and didn't want to budge. So ultimately, we decided on surrogacy. Luckily for us, we found a willing surrogate very soon. It was his coworker Sarah, 27F. He was the one who suggested her to me and said that she would be more than happy to do it if we were a match. I was relieved that we didn't have to look so hard to find a surrogate, but I should have known. I don't know why my instincts did not kick in, because they generally do. I should have known that something was wrong, and it could not be a mere coincidence that she was ready and willing to be a surrogate in a jiffy. None of these suspicions arose at that time. I was just grateful that the first part of the entire process was sorted, and now we just had to go deal with the doctors. She went through some tests, and some intense doctor's appointments, but the doctors seemed positive. She was young and fertile, and they said that she had a very good chance of carrying the pregnancy to term. The samples had been collected and stored beforehand, so it was just the part of implantation that remained. Once all of this and the paperwork were done, the doctors gave us an appointment for the big day. Both Zach and I were so excited and anxious the entire time. I felt like a little girl on her way to write an exam. Ha! Sarah looked tense, too, but she put up a brave front for us. Once the implantation was done, we were asked to come again in 2 to 3 weeks to see if the implantation had been successful. They gave a to-do list to Sarah, the main point of which was for her to not take stress, which seemed ironic, but it is what it is. The next few days went by in a blur. We were in constant touch with Sarah, and I now feel maybe we became a little overbearing. Zach and I went over to her house once every day to check up on her. We found out that the implantation had been a success on the day of the follow-up, and I think that was the happiest day of my life. It was as though any worries or regrets that I had just melted away. Zach and I were worried about the baby during the first trimester, so we didn't announce to anyone what was happening. We had planned that we would make the announcement in the 4th or the 5th month, and not before that. The first few weeks after we got news of the success were great. Both Zach and I were in touch with Sarah and helped her out with any medical issue that she was facing. Things started going downhill by the 1.5-month mark. Sarah's morning sickness got really aggravated, and she had to call in sick to work because it was so unmanageable. The doctors prescribed some very mild medicines, but essentially told her that she had to toughen it out as this was normal, and would probably last the entire trimester, if not more. It was during this time that I got injured, too. It was a fracture in my right wrist, and I needed help with a lot of things around the house. Zach's attention was divided. For the first couple of days, I didn't bat an eye, as I was unable to check up on Sarah because of my injury. I was glad that he understood the gravity of the situation and took things into his own hands. He dealt with the Sarah front while I recovered. But what began to irk me was that he was completely nonchalant about my injury. It was as though I was not important anymore. All his attention was on Sarah. He wanted to spend every free moment either with her or talking about her. I tried not to say anything because Zach was juggling a lot of things at once, with me being injured. But I did get really snappy with him. It all came to a head one day when he asked me if I even cared about our child, and I snapped back at him not caring about me at all. After this initial eruption of anger, we sat down and discussed what both of us felt, and he said he would do better to make me feel important and heard. I trusted him, big mistake, and we moved forward. In the next couple of days, his behavior towards me improved, I will give him that. He was more attentive, we were spending more time together, but his mind seemed occupied elsewhere. He was still fawning over Sarah like a little puppy, and with every passing day, it began to feel more and more like he thought she was not our surrogate, but rather his wife. She had taken an off from work, and while it was paid leave, Zach was still working extra hours to cover for her and went to meet her every single day, even if I had been to see her earlier in the day. The first thing he did after getting off from work was driving to her place and spend some bonding time with her. This is how he described it. He was bonding with her, not the surrogate. He came back, changed, ate, and went to sleep. We had a dead married life. We didn't even talk to each other if it wasn't about Sarah. His focus was not on his kid, but on the surrogate carrying his kid, and it was just devastating for me to be around that kind of talk all the time. It made me feel thoroughly inadequate and incomplete as a woman. I wanted to raise this issue with him, but I knew that I had no stand to do so, because it was my infertility that led to this. We needed a surrogate because I couldn't naturally have children, and at the end of the day, Sarah was helping us out at the cost of her health and life. I felt like a disgusting human being for feeling envy and anger towards her, instead of gratitude. The entire situation was just driving me off the rails, to the point that I had begun contemplating whether surrogacy was even a good option at all. Instead of bringing us closer, it had driven a wedge between Zach and me, and that was not something that I had anticipated at all. I don't know what came over me, but this dynamic between Zach and Sarah was driving me crazy. I was overthinking every waking moment, and I somehow had this nagging feeling that they were having an affair. I had no other way to explain it. Rationally, I could explain his emotions as those of a man on the brink of fatherhood that he eagerly awaited. I probably would have felt the same way. But all the alarm clocks were ringing in my head, and I knew that I needed to do something to calm my nerves. By the time I had decided to snoop through his stuff in order to find something that either confirmed my suspicions or assuaged them, Sarah was over 5 months pregnant. While Zach's entire focus was on Sarah and her pregnancy, my entire focus was on trying to find out what was up between them. I admit that at that time, I was not the best partner to my husband or the best support system for Sarah, but in my defense, I was too muddled in my own head to take care of them. And to all those who are going to pounce on me in the comments, saying that I should just have spoken to my husband, I tried. Not once, but multiple times, but his behavior never changed. And that was what made me feel worse. That despite me expressing my feelings, he had no regard for them at all. So whenever I had time, I used to check his phone and chat. He actually has 2 numbers, so it took me a while to scan everything. I didn't find anything either in texts or on his Instagram. The texts and DMs were mostly just her informing him of anything that was up with her, and him checking up on her. It was a little too safe for work. In some places, it did feel like chunks of the conversation had been deleted because there was no flow in the chat, but I couldn't be sure. I felt a little guilty after all this snooping because I did not end up finding anything even remotely fishy. Nonetheless, I was not satisfied. I then decided to check his emails. I finally got the chance to get hold of them yesterday. His professional email didn't have anything between them, just official correspondence regarding work. I checked his private emails and nothing was even there. No emails, no contact with Sarah, nothing. It was then that a third email ID caught my eye, one that was already logged in on his system. I quickly opened that and it had mails with just one other email ID, dating back to 2022. I didn't have time to read all of the emails, so copied and pasted a lot of them and sent the doc to myself. I felt that I would get caught snooping, and it would ruin this one chance I had of confirming my doubts. Thankfully, I had luck on my side and I was able to copy the entire exchange without Zach waking up. I could not sleep a wink the entire night. I wanted to read every single mail that was there aloud for him to hear, but I knew I had to be smart about it, not impulsive. I decided to wait until he left for work the next day and then read the emails. What I found shook me to the core. It made me want to fire bullets in his chest. He was not just cheating on me emotionally and physically, but he was also planning on defrauding me. It took me hours to go through all the emails. So basically, what I found was that he and Sarah had been having an affair since early 2022. Nobody in their office knew about it. It started with him talking to her about our problems, and she would listen to him and validate him. Gradually, it developed into something more. Intimate sleazy texts and images, verbal abuse and sarcasm directed towards me, and all that jazz. It was horrifying to read. Something broke inside me when I read all this. It felt as though everything that I had built over the years had come crashing down on my face and I couldn't do anything about it. I gathered some courage and read more. So basically, Sarah could never have children of her own, in the sense that there was some problem with her eggs. And she was the typical woman Zach would like to have as the mother to his kids, so they hatched a plan together. The plan was that they would somehow get me to agree to surrogacy, and Sarah would step in as the savior. Zach had convinced Sarah that once the baby was born, it would be in the best interest of their family that Sarah quit her job and become a stay-at-home mom. The only way that would have been able to afford a luxurious life with only one income and a family of 3 would be if they somehow roped me in. The plan was that right before the baby's birth, Zach would start picking fights with me, and he would ultimately lead us to divorce. He would then press the courts for primary custody because even though I was the biological mother, he was willing to raise the child with the surrogate. I would then have to pay hefty child support payments till the child turned 18, which I could afford given my job. They would then mooch off of these payments and live their picture-perfect life together. All of this was detailed in its entirety in those emails. At first, I didn't even feel the hurt. I just felt shocked and numb. My brain could not process the months of meticulous planning. If they were so happy together, if he didn't want to be with me, he could have done the respectable thing and told me. I had been living in a sham of a marriage for the last 2 years, working through issues, letting my self-esteem be crushed, all for him to be able to have an affair, and a baby, my baby, with another woman. Every single ounce of love that I felt for him just vanished in an instant. I could only feel rage and disgust in every fiber of my being. I knew that I had to do something, and I needed to do it fast. I needed to get my ducks in a row and get myself and my kid out of this mess, and that too as soon as possible. I called my lawyer friend Stacy and told her that I needed to stay with her for a few days and sort things out. I then sent a text to Zach saying that Stacy was sick and needed someone to help, so I'd be going over to her house so that I wouldn't be disturbed. I don't know where I stand legally in this mess, but I know I'm not going to give up or back down. Update 1. Stacy and I had a long chat. She cannot fathom that all this had been going on for 2 years and I didn't get a clue. I told her that I had no reason to distrust him, despite the fact that we were having our fair share of troubles. I had never anticipated that the man I'd been with for 13 years would do something like this and betray my trust completely. The good thing is that we are sure of the next legal steps that we have to take, and she says she is positive that I'm going to win this one. However, she says that everything needs to happen before the delivery and that we will have to make the entire scheme and therefore, their little affair public. Because if that is not done, I don't stand a chance in the courts. The other way is that I wait it out and wait for Zach to start the divorce, and then try to get primary custody, but that seems unlikely, and to be very honest, Zach does not deserve this grace. He deserves all the mudslinging that he is going to get for ruining my life like this. And I can't wait to expose him and Sarah everywhere, in the courts, in the family, and most importantly, in their workplace. That is the only way that I can get my revenge. Update 2. It has been a total of 3 days since I read his emails. After spending a day with Stacy, I went back home for one day and packed all my important stuff while he was at work. I didn't want to give him even a split second to think that I knew, or that I was planning something, so I decided to stay with Zach that day and tried to behave as normally as possible. Stacy, meanwhile, was getting the divorce papers in order. Today, right after Zach went to work, I took all my stuff and went to Stacy's house. She had by then sent the divorce papers to his office, and a notice to his boss, saying that 2 of his employees are going to be involved in a long-drawn legal suit on grounds of adultery and fraud. This was only meant to make the management aware of the cute little affair between my soon-to-be ex-husband and his witch of a partner. It did have the desired effect because Zach has been trying to contact me through all means possible. He has tried calling, voicemails, texting, and using his friends/colleagues' phones to call. Stacy has advised me to not receive any unknown call on my phone, and if I do, I need to record it because anything that he says from this point onwards can be considered as evidence. His messages in themselves are very incriminating. He has had a total outburst in my chat and is alternating between begging me to come back to make things right or calling me every name under the sun. Surprisingly, Sarah hasn't called me or tried to get in touch yet, though I am sure that Zach would have informed her of the recent developments that are going to shake her world. I think I now finally have the time and luxury to grieve the loss of my marriage and life as I knew it since the part of the confrontation is over. I have been in fight mode ever since I found out, so now I know I can let myself feel all these feelings that I've been bottling down for the last couple of days. Update 3. It has been a month since I served divorce papers to Zach, and things are looking good at my end, if I may say so myself. I have moved in with Stacy in her extra bedroom for the time being, but I will finalize my lease for the new apartment by the end of the week. It's a 2-bedroom apartment in a reasonably decent part of town and fits in my budget really well. Zach has been fired from his job, which was what Stacy intended with that information leaked to his boss. Now that he has no source of income, Sarah and he cannot claim custody of the child when it's born. Sarah has not been fired, because the company has probably taken into account the fact that she is pregnant. But, she has been asked to rethink her place within the firm after pregnancy. However, people in their company now think that the kid is actually Zach's and Sarah's, and that is not working in their favor either. Their perception of the industry has been tarnished completely, and this is affecting Sarah a lot. I know all this because of a drunken call from my soon-to-be ex-husband. So all in all, Stacy and I are almost certain that we are going to win this one. I cannot divulge more details as of now because the case is still ongoing and this might be held against me. I might have to grant some visitation rights to Zach, but according to Stacy, Sarah will have no legal rights over the kid, which is a relief to me. I won't be updating anymore because I don't want details of the case getting out for risk of identification. Thank you to everyone who commented and suggested a course of action for me, I am very grateful, but now I'm taking a break from Reddit and moving forward.